My brother held the phone close to his face the way someone does when they want you to see exactly how little they care about you. Behind him, I could see my studio, the exposed Douglas fir beams I had spent 3 weekends sanding by hand. The vintage brick wall I'd mortared back together myself, after the previous tenant had patched it with drywall. There was now a gaping hole where my custom oak reception desk used to be, and my brother was smiling through the dust like a man who had just inherited a country. "Relax," he said. "You weren't even using the space properly. A photography studio? Claire, that building is worth $2 million in this market. You're wasting it on what? Headshots and baby showers?" He laughed. He actually laughed. "Mom and Dad agree. We're converting it into a co-working space. Tech people. Real revenue. You were just keeping the seat warm." I heard Priya crying in the background. She had called me 20 minutes earlier, voice cracking, to tell me that my parents had arrived with a locksmith and 2 contractors, claiming I had authorized emergency HVAC maintenance. They had walked straight past her, changed the lock on the back door, and my brother had started pulling up the original wide plank pine flooring I had refinished 3 years ago. I looked at my phone screen. I was standing in a hotel room in Vancouver, 2 time zones away, in the middle of a 4-day destination wedding shoot. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "Okay?" "Okay," I repeated. "Send Priya home. Make sure she's paid for the week." "Claire, you're not even going to argue? Transfer Priya's payroll to my personal account before end of day," I said. "Her job is safe. Tell her that." I took a screenshot of his face before I hung up. To understand why I didn't book the next flight back to Toronto, why I didn't call my lawyer that second, and have them all removed from the building, you need to understand the arithmetic of my family. Not the emotional arithmetic, which is complicated and exhausting, and never balances. The structural arithmetic. The kind that runs beneath everything, like load-bearing posts, beneath a heritage floor. I am 31 years old. I am the younger of 2 children. And for as long as I can remember, my brother has been the investment. And I have been the return. He is 5 years older, which in our family translated into 5 years of Head Starts he never used. University tuition paid in full by my parents, he dropped out after 2 years to pursue a dropshipping business that lasted 8 months. Seed money of $40,000 for a food truck concept he abandoned when he realized commercial kitchens had health codes. Another $30,000 for a cryptocurrency trading account he managed until it wasn't an account anymore. Each time, my mother would sit across from me at the kitchen table and say the same thing. "He just needs one more chance to find his footing. You understand, don't you? You've always been the steady one." Steady. That was the word they used for me. Not smart. Not driven. Not talented. Steady. The way you describe a table that doesn't wobble. I opened Claire Mercier's studio in 2017, with money I had saved for 6 years, working weekends as a second shooter for other photographers. I rented a 1,800 square foot ground floor unit in a Victorian-era building on Queen Street West, a building that had been on the Toronto Heritage Register since 1994. I knew everything about that building before I signed the lease. I knew that the original ceiling medallions were protected under the Ontario Heritage Act. I knew that the cast iron columns running down the center of the space were load-bearing and could not be altered without a heritage permit application, a structural engineer's report, and approval from the city's Heritage Preservation Services office. I knew this because I had spent 4 months studying the file at the Toronto Archives before I ever looked at the lease. The building was beautiful precisely because it was old and stubborn and built to outlast everyone in it. I understood that. My family did not understand my business. They understood that I had a nice space and a nice neighborhood, and they understood it the way people understand a painting they can't quite read, with a vague, possessive admiration that had nothing to do with the work itself. My mother liked to tell her friends I was an artist. My father occasionally referred to it as Claire's hobby space. My brother, when the topic came up at family dinners, would nod slowly in the way people nod when they're thinking about something else entirely. What they never understood, what I had never tried to explain, because explaining felt like begging, was that Claire Mercier's studio was not a hobby, and it was not a photography business in the simple sense. It was a full-service creative space. We shot editorial campaigns for 3 local fashion brands. We rented by the hour to videographers and content creators. We hosted workshops. We had a waiting list for portrait sessions 18 weeks long. Priya, my studio manager, had been with me for 4 years, and knew the operation better than I did. I had built something real. In 7 years, I had turned a $6,000 a month lease in one of the most competitive rental markets in the country into a business valued at just under $300,000. Every dollar of that was mine. Not my family's. Mine. My brother had decided he wanted it. He didn't want to find a co-working space. He had found one in me. He wanted my exposed brick and my Douglas fir beams and my south-facing windows without the 7 years of work that had gone into making those things mean something. He had told my parents the plan. My parents, who had never quite forgiven me for not needing their help, had told him it sounded like a wonderful idea. I sat on the edge of my hotel bed in Vancouver and looked at the screenshot of my brother grinning through a cloud of renovation dust in my studio. The ceiling light behind him was the original schoolhouse pendant I had sourced from an estate sale in Hamilton. He didn't know what it was, he just knew it looked good. For the first time in 11 years of being the steady one, the exhaustion was louder than the guilt. I opened my laptop. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't rage and it wasn't grief and it wasn't the kind of cold, righteous fury that looks good in retrospect. It was something quieter and more final. It was the feeling of putting down something very heavy that you have been carrying for so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. They didn't love what I had built. They loved that they could reach it. If I flew home and stopped them physically, I knew exactly what would happen. My brother would tell my parents I had threatened him. My mother would cry. My father would say I was being dramatic. My brother would become the victim of his difficult, selfish sister, who cared more about her aesthetic than her family. I had watched this narrative play out for 11 years across every failed venture, every bailout, every conversation that started with "he just needs one more chance." If I fought them now, the story would stay the same. Claire is impossible. Claire is cold. Claire doesn't understand family. I wasn't going to fight them. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. There is a concept in judo called kuzushi, breaking your opponent's balance. You don't meet force with force. You feel the direction they're already moving, and you extend it. You help them fall. You use the momentum of their own certainty to put them on the floor. My brother was running at me with a renovator's hammer and 30 years of untested confidence. If I stopped him, he would pivot and play victim. If I let him run, he would run straight into a wall I had quietly placed in his path. I called my lawyer, not to stop anything, to draft a document. The document was titled, Transfer of Studio Management and Renovation Rights. To a casual reader, to someone, say, who would skim past page 1, the moment they saw a dollar amount, it looked like a surrender. It had my signature block at the top. It had language about voluntary relinquishment of day-to-day operational control. It looked like a woman who was tired of fighting and just wanted out. I put the bait on the first page. Upon execution of this agreement, operating reserves of $12,000 currently held in the studio's business account will be released immediately to the incoming project manager to fund approved renovation costs. $12,000. I knew exactly what that number would do to my brother. It was enough to buy the standing desks and the Nespresso machines and the LED strip lighting he had probably already been pricing. It was enough to make him feel like the transaction was in his favor. It was enough to make him sign without reading further. Then I buried the actual document inside it. Section 3. Clause 3. 4. The incoming project manager assumes sole and personal liability for all structural alterations, permit applications, heritage compliance assessments, and code violations arising from any renovation work conducted following the execution of this agreement. Section 5. Clause 5. 2. Any renovation, demolition, or alteration to a heritage, designated property, conducted without prior written approval from Heritage Preservation Services, City of Toronto, constitutes a violation under the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990. The project manager named in this agreement accepts personal, financial, and legal responsibility for all fines, remediation costs, and legal proceedings arising from such violations. Section 7, Clause 7. 1. The guarantors identified below agree to indemnify the building's primary leaseholder and the landlord against all damages to the heritage, designated property, up to the total value of the remaining lease term. Guarantors accept joint and several liability for all amounts owed. I had left 2 lines at the bottom of the guarantors section, blank, with printed names below them. Robert Mercier. Diane Mercier. My parents. I sent the email at 11:15 at night, Vancouver time. Subject line, fine, you win, transfer docs attached. Message body, I'm done fighting. The space is yours. Just sign this so I can release the business funds and remove my name from the utility accounts. Once it's signed, the $12,000 transfers same day. I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I did not sleep. At 2:17 in the morning, my phone lit up. Document signed, Daniel Mercier. Document signed, Robert Mercier. Document signed, Diane Mercier. 3 signatures. 9 minutes. They had not scrolled past page 2. I stared at the timestamps for a long time. I had been prepared to lose. I had genuinely believed there was a chance one of them would show it to someone, a friend, a neighbor, anyone with even a basic familiarity with contracts. I had been prepared for the gamble to fail. The fact that it hadn't did not make me feel victorious. It made me feel the specific sadness of being proven right about something you wished you were wrong about. They had signed their names to a document they hadn't read because $12,000 was enough to stop them from being careful. That told me everything about how much any of this had ever been about me. For the next 3 weeks, I did not go home. I had 2 more shoots booked in Vancouver. I worked. I answered emails. I processed raw files in my hotel room, until my eyes burned. I called Priya every morning. She was professional and contained, and only once, on the 5th day, said quietly, "Claire, I keep the logs of everything they're doing. I photograph it every time I walk by." I told her she was wonderful. I meant it completely. My brother performed his renovation the way he performed everything, loudly, publicly, and without the slightest concern for the structural integrity of what he was dismantling. He posted on Instagram daily, under the username @DanBuildsThings, which he had apparently created specifically for this project. He documented everything. He posted a reel of himself and 2 contractors prying up my pine flooring with a crowbar, captioned, "Clearing out the old to build something that actually scales." He posted a video of a sledgehammer going into the brick partition wall between the main studio and the editing suite. A wall I had specifically confirmed, twice, with a structural engineer, was non-load bearing, but which connected directly to a century-old chimney chase that absolutely was. He narrated it like a home renovation show, taking this baby down for that open concept co-working feel. "The bones of this place are incredible. We're just unlocking what was always here." My parents commented with fire emojis. His friends commented with things like "visionary move," and finally, "Queen West gets a real workspace." I watched every video. I saved every video. I forwarded the URLs to my lawyer with a brief note that said, "Please log these with timestamps." Then, on a Tuesday night, I called the City of Toronto's Heritage Preservation Services non-emergency line and filed a formal complaint. I identified the property address. I described the structural alterations being conducted without a heritage permit. I provided the Instagram account as a source of documented evidence, including video of the chimney chase wall demolition occurring in real time. The inspector I spoke to asked me to confirm the heritage designation. I confirmed it. She asked if I had documentation of the alterations. I gave her the Instagram handle. Her tone shifted into something flat and very focused. She told me a priority inspection would be scheduled. I booked a flight home. I timed it so I would land the morning before my brother's grand opening event, which he had promoted on his Instagram story as Dan's co-work launch. "Join us Thursday at 10 a.m., 274 Queen St. W. Free espresso. Real work starts here." He had invited 63 people. He had hired a barista for the morning. I did not go to my old studio. I stayed at a hotel on Adelaide Street, and I ordered room service, and I watched the clock. Thursday morning, I parked a rental car on the opposite side of Queen Street at 9:45. The building looked genuinely beautiful from the outside, which made something in my chest tighten in a way I had not expected. He had power washed the facade. He had replaced the front windows incorrectly, with aluminum frames that were non-compliant with the heritage designation, but they were clean. Through the glass I could see the standing desks, the Edison bulb pendants he'd hung in the approximate positions of mine, the greenery. He had put plants everywhere. He understood aesthetics. I'll give him that. He just didn't understand anything beneath them. I watched the first guests arrive. My father's business contacts, a few of my brother's university friends, my mother in a cream blazer, greeting people at the door like she owned the place, which, in her mind, I think she genuinely believed she did by now. I pulled up the Instagram livestream on my phone. My brother was at the center of the room holding a ceramic mug, telling a circle of admirers about his vision for building a community-first workspace that honors the heritage of the neighborhood. My mother, to a woman beside her, we had to step in. "Claire had the space for 7 years and never maximized it. My son has a completely different energy. You can already feel it, can't you?" I watched a fine white powder drift down from the ceiling in the corner above the chimney chase wall. Not dust from the renovation. Fresh plaster, separating in real time from a beam that no longer had the support it was designed to have. The crack above it was thin, but it was moving, a slow dark line walking toward the center medallion. My lawyer, Michelle Beaumont, texted me at 9:58, "Crossing the street now." At 10:03, a white City of Toronto fleet van pulled up to the curb. The heritage property inspector stepped out with a clipboard and a high-vis vest. A building safety officer followed. They did not look like people who were enjoying their Thursday. Inside, my brother lifted his mug toward the camera. "To new beginnings and real community." The front door opened. The music stopped. It took the room about 4 seconds to understand that the 2 people in high-vis vests were not part of the event. The heritage inspector walked directly to the chimney chase wall, or rather to the gaping archway where it used to be. She pulled out a measuring device. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the crack. She looked at the fresh gap between the chimney breast and the adjacent beam where the mortar was visibly separating. She took photographs. She spoke quietly to the building safety officer. He nodded. He peeled an orange sticker from a pad on his clipboard and pressed it flat against the front window glass. Unsafe structure, do not occupy. Order issued under the Ontario Building Code. I need everyone to exit the building immediately, he said. This is not optional. The structural integrity of this property has been compromised. Vacate now, please. My brother said. Whoa, hold on. You can't just… Sir, please step outside. My mother tried to put herself between the inspector and the room. There must be a misunderstanding. My son has been renovating this space. Everything is fine. Ma'am, the chimney chase wall that has been removed was providing lateral support to the primary roof beam on the north face of this building. I need you outside. The live stream was still running. My brother had apparently forgotten to stop it. The camera captured the room emptying, captured my mother's face shifting from outrage to something smaller and less certain, captured the heritage inspector photographing the missing wall where, on my brother's own Instagram, he had stood with a sledgehammer and said, I decided the wall had to go. My father stepped outside and looked up and down the street the way people do when they're hoping nobody they know is watching. My brother was arguing with the building safety officer. My mother was on the phone. Then the front door opened again, and Michel Beaumont walked in carrying a leather folio. He introduced himself to the heritage inspector by name, produced his Law Society of Ontario card, and asked if he might address the occupants regarding the status of the lease. The inspector, who had what she needed from the building, gestured toward the street. Outside, in front of approximately 45 people still holding espresso cups and co-working welcome packets, Michel set the folio on the hood of a parked car and opened it. I represent the primary leaseholder of this property, he said. He was entirely calm. Michel has been practicing real estate and heritage property law in Toronto for 22 years, and I have never once heard him raise his voice. I want to clarify the legal status of the renovations that have been conducted here over the past 3 weeks, my brother said. She signed the building over. We have the document. You do, Michel agreed. He produced a printed copy of the transfer of studio management and renovation rights. And I'd like to draw your attention to Section 3, Clause 3.4. He read it aloud, slowly, in the way that lawyers read things aloud when they want every word to land individually. My brother's face changed somewhere around the words sole and personal liability. Michel turned to the next flagged page. Section 5, Clause 5.2 addresses violations under the Ontario Heritage Act. He read that one too. He paused afterward in the way that good lawyers pause. Not for effect, exactly, but to let the silence do the work that words have already set up. Then he turned to the final flagged page. Section 7, Clause 7.1, he said. He looked at my parents. Robert and Diane Mercier. You are listed as guarantors under this agreement. You signed as guarantors. My mother said. We didn't, we signed the transfer. We signed to help Daniel. You signed this specific document, Michel said, and he held up their 3 signatures on the final page. The timestamps from that night, 2:17 in the morning, printed neatly below each name. This agreement, including the guarantor clause, which indemnifies the landlord and the primary leaseholder against all damages to the heritage property. As guarantors, if Daniel cannot satisfy those costs, the liability transfers to your joint assets. My father looked at my brother. My brother looked at the heritage inspector, who was writing on her clipboard and not looking at anyone. The heritage inspector handed my brother a notice of violation. Unauthorized demolition and alteration of a heritage-designated structure under the Ontario Heritage Act. Required remediation. Full structural assessment by a licensed engineer. Emergency shoring of the compromised beam. Heritage permit application filed retroactively. And restoration of the chimney chase wall to original specifications. Estimated minimum cost of remediation. $225,000. Plus the heritage fines, which started at $15,000 for a first violation of this category, and scaled from there depending on the extent of the damage documentation, which in this case had been helpfully filmed in high definition, and posted publicly by the person receiving the citation. My brother said, I don't have that kind of money. Nobody in the crowd said anything. Michel nodded, as if this was information he had anticipated. In that case, as per Clause 7, 1, the liability transfers to the guarantors. Additionally, the building's primary landlord has instructed me to notify you that the unauthorized alterations have triggered the lease's heritage compliance clause. The remaining 41 months of the lease term are subject to acceleration. Total outstanding, $163,000. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not anger, not crying, something underneath both of those. My father looked at my brother for a long time without saying anything. The kind of look that crosses a line you can't uncross. 3 days after the city issued the evacuation order, the building's insurer completed their review and sent a single-page letter. Coverage denied. The policy exclusion for intentional unauthorized structural alteration applied. My brother's own renovation videos, which he had still not taken down from his Instagram, apparently under the impression that deleting them would constitute some kind of admission had done in 48 hours. What legal teams bill $300 an hour to produce? My parents held a family meeting at their house in Scarborough that I was not invited to. I know this because my aunt texted me afterward to say that it had not gone well and that my mother had spent most of it explaining that I had tricked them. My aunt, who has known me for 31 years and known my brother for 36, replied with a single sentence that I am not going to repeat here because it belongs to her. Within 60 days, my parents had retained a debt restructuring advisor. The acceleration clause and the remediation liability, combined with the existing mortgage on their house, put them in a position that required— I am being careful with my language here, because I do not feel triumphant about this part. Only clear-eyed, significant adjustments to their financial situation. The house in Scarborough went to a sale process. They are renting now, in Pickering. My brother filed for personal insolvency protection under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. His new Instagram, which he had renamed at Dan Rebuilds Community, stopped posting after the 4th update. My business interruption insurance, which I had maintained throughout the ownership period, and which covered losses arising from third-party unauthorized alterations to the lease property, triggered when the evacuation order was issued. Because the damage had been caused by a third party operating under a signed management transfer agreement, the claim was processed without dispute. The payout covered my revenue losses for the full remediation period. I used part of it to lease a new studio space in Leslieville, a former commercial print shop, concrete floors, high ceilings, no heritage designation, and no ornamental ceiling medallions, which meant I could build it exactly the way I wanted, without asking anyone's permission. No walk-in retail. No street signage beyond a small brass plate beside the door. Just a serious, well-lit production space built for the work. Priya had a key cut before I did. She's the studio director now, with a salary that reflects what she actually does, and has always done. She brought the client waitlist with her, which by the time we reopened had stretched to 22 weeks. She also brought, on her first morning in the new space, a bottle of Ontario sparkling wine and 2 coffee mugs because we didn't have glasses yet, and she said to not needing anyone's permission, and I thought that was exactly right. I sent 2 messages before I blocked the family group chat. The first was to my aunt, privately, who I love, and who had nothing to do with any of this. The second was to the group itself, which by then included my parents and my brother, and 2 cousins who had watched the whole thing unfold with the horrified fascination of people watching a car accident from a safe distance. The message was 4 words. You wanted it. Yours. Then I put my phone in my jacket pocket, walked across the concrete floor of my new studio, and picked up my camera. The morning light through the industrial windows was coming in flat and clean, and exactly the way I needed it. Priya was calibrating the backdrop rails. There was a client arriving in 40 minutes. I had work to do. Have you ever had to stand completely still while someone dismantled something you built, because you knew that moving would cost you more than waiting? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from.